It's beginning to look a lot like Hackmas. Everywhere you go. I shouldn't sing. I really shouldn't. Welcome back in to Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the people's podcast, the players' podcast, the podcast that, quite frankly, is here to entertain, to inform, and ultimately to bring you the best Flyers coverage. I'm Russ Joy, joined as always by Anthony SanFilippo, who you can find on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. Anthony, a lot of things have happened in the world, and we're not here to break down the farthest thing that's been found in the solar system. I don't know if you saw this today. There is a dwarf planet that they're now calling far out that is 1,000 years to orbit the sun. It's 120 astronomical units. There we go. Very exciting stuff happening in the solar system, but apparently something happened here on Earth. And that, of course, is the firing of Dave Hakstol. Your thoughts? 610-632.
Before I give my thoughts on the firing of the coach, I do have to address two things that you brought up here right at the beginning. One, did you spend your entire prep period today planning on singing at the beginning of the podcast today?
No, I just rolled with it.
You just rolled with it? That was just fresh off the top of your head?
That's fresh off the top.
All right. Just making sure that wasn't prepared, because if it was prepared, then I was going to tell you we're stopping and re-recording.
Do you want to stop and re-record?
No. If it was off the top of your head, then I say that's great. You go with it. You make a choice, and whether it sinks or swims, you just go with it. But if it was something that you were planning all day long and that's all you came up with, I would have told you it sucked and start over. So there's that.
Give me a rating. Give me a rating on a scale of Dave Hakstol to Ken Hitchcock. It's a really bad scale. Like, I'm not really looking for much.
Yeah, no, that's a tough scale, because I'm trying to figure out where because you're probably a somewhere in the John Stevens category there.
Oh. I'm super conservative. I sit on leads and my team blows them. Oh.
And the second thing, they actually called this new planet that they found, they called it Far Out.
That's legit.
That's what they called this planet?
Astronomical units. It's very important. Yeah, it takes 1,000 years to orbit the sun.
Still, I love the fact that they actually named the planet Far Out.
That's far out, man.
I know. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Actually. Anyway.
Just to give people a little bit of perspective. So, this is so dumb. The planet is 120 astronomical units away. Earth is 1 astronomical unit away from the sun. Pluto is 34. So it's nearly 4 times farther away than Pluto is from the sun. There you go. Speaking of things that are far away from the sun, Dave Hakstol is very far away from Wells Fargo Center, which is the sun and the center of our universe.
So we kind of
solar system, not universe.
Yeah. So we kind of started catching wind about this very little bit over the weekend. And then my Sunday actually was spent, my entire Sunday that I was thinking was going to be a nice, relaxing day off, just kind of chill out, watch some football, not have to really worry about anything, was spent talking to anyone and everyone who would talk to me about what the heck was going on with the Flyers as they were flying across the country themselves back from Vancouver. After an absolutely dreadful 2 games. And I should just say, both of those games were terrible. They were absolutely, absolutely terrible. And they were so bad, we didn't even write about them.
No. There wasn't anything to break down. They were
it was getting to this. It's like we're writing about the same thing every damn game. Yep. I will say this. I will say the one difference between the Edmonton and the Vancouver, the Edmonton game was just turnover after turnover after turnover. It was unbelievable. Like I was out watching it, and I kept saying, I'm going to say every time they turn the puck over, just in case nobody's paying attention. And I just kept saying it over and over again. Turnover. It was so bad how many times they were turning the puck over. But so there was that. And then the game against Vancouver, they just came out and they looked dead. And I got a text. And I'm going to read you this text. I'm not going to say who it was from, but I'm going to read you this text from a former player that during that game. And this guy it was pretty funny what what he had said, because I'll even read what I said back to you, or said back to him. Where's it at? I'm just scrolling through my text here.
This is good pod.
Yeah, this is good pod right here. Okay. Team looks. So the first thing he texts is, "Team looks awful, no passion." That's the first thing he says. Okay. To which I don't disagree. Okay. And then I say, and I'm talking about how it reminds me of the 06-07 team. There's talent there, but a bad game day attitude. I say make a few fixes, and I think this team could be a decent team, but it's not as it's currently put together. And he responded, "It's as if players are waiting for him to get fired." And I've said, "You've seen that before, have you?" And he said, "Yes, I have." And he says, "I agree, there are some good pieces there, just hard to watch right now."
Woof.
So that's a former player who was texting me on Sunday.
Time to play Who's That Flyer?
Nah, ain't doing that. I won't give that away. But I mean, it's somebody who I covered, so you could, go through the roster of the past. I have a few ideas. I'll talk to you about them off air.
Past
19 years and see if you can figure it out. But other than that, that's as far as I will go with revealing who it might be.
Yeah, there was a lot of crazy stuff that happened this weekend. Since the last episode, I think we had talked about the Winnipeg game and the fact that the Flyers went from a 6-2 win against Buffalo in Buffalo to getting absolutely shellacked 7-1 in Winnipeg. But the Calgary game, they had an epic collapse. The Oilers game, as you mentioned, it didn't look like they were ever really in it. And the Canucks game was just going through the motions at best. And so there have been plenty of stretches in the season where we have theorized that something could happen. There have been whispers pretty much the entire season that nobody is really safe, and that went from the front office all the way, to the coach and to the players. And it was prior to the last West Coast swing, which was, how long ago was it? Beginning of November?
When they were out in California?
Yeah, so that was back in the end of October. That was at Anaheim, at LA, at San Jose, at Arizona. We talked about it at that point, the fact that if that road trip didn't go well, there's a potential that Dave Hakstol could have lost his job, and it didn't end up happening, obviously. And the rumblings all season have been there. Obviously, when Hakstol was here, there was still a feeling that Hakstol was going to remain loyal to his coach, and then obviously after the team dismissed him of out of his role, it had come up that maybe there had been a little bit of a falling out between Hakstol and Hakstol. Maybe it wasn't all rainbows and smiles between the two, but Hakstol was still rolling with his guy, and perhaps it was because he was micromanaging him, and not every coach that you bring in is going to want to get micromanaged as much as Hakstol may have done with Hakstol. But the rumblings and the rumors have been there. But in the interest of following through on what I said in the last episode, which is if somebody has a source and somebody thinks that there's something that's going to go down, you've got to do what you're supposed to do, which is you're supposed to cite them. And it's a thing that I don't know. I caught some little bit of heat on Twitter for saying that I didn't like the fact that people didn't shout you out when you had the Hakstol stuff, and people said, well, it's just rumors at this point. It's not really being announced as 100% this is happening. And then, even in the aftermath of you doing some reporting on Hakstol behind the scenes with multiple sources and all that, there were some people who were like, well, people have agendas. They don't want to, you're not going to get a lot of people coming out with positive stories about Hakstol on this point. They're just trying to filter their stories through, and that was kind of the thing. So you didn't end up getting much credit, but I think it's important that if we're going to, hold to this idea that you've got to give credit, then, let's do it. So over the weekend, Steph Driver of Broad Street Hockey put out that she had heard rumblings that Hakstol's job could have been on the line with a poor result, and then went on to say that I can't pull up the tweets right now because I found out yesterday she blocked me on Twitter. It's the first time I've ever gotten blocked, Anthony. I don't know how to feel about it. I'm just kind of going off memory here. But
welcome to the club, my friend.
Yeah. So I don't know. But what I do remember is she said that
Here,
I believe
I can read. I can read them for you.
Oh, okay.
So I'll just read them off of the three that I think that are the most prevalent.
They're in our Slack chat. I could probably.
Yeah,
find
we know
them.
the Flyers can't continue what they've been doing. We all know this. I'm hearing rumblings about more changes on the horizon. The rumblings are Hakstol's job is on the line with this game tonight, but the writing is already on the wall. We know they want to make a move before the roster freeze. This has been reiterated, not prospects, roster players. The rumor that I've been hearing for a while, since before Hakstol was fired, is that senior management wants the coach who is known by one single letter. The message has gotten stronger. Those were her three. Those were her three tweets.
That was it.
Yep.
And so there were some people who ran with it. Eventually, Hakstol didn't lose his job in that moment, and it stretched on another day or so.
I think she put that out on Saturday.
Saturday, yeah,
which was right before the Vancouver game.
Yep.
And then on Sunday, I started to get messages from everywhere. Everywhere. And when I tell you that I get messages, my phone, and I joked about it, like jokingly in our Slack chat, saying I hate when my phone blows up, and then Kyle goes and puts that into the post today with my update that Anthony tells us he hates when his phone blows up. Don't say that. People will stop texting me. But when I tell you that I was getting messages on Sunday from people in the organization at many levels, it was just outrageous. And and to be honest with you, the hard part is there was a variety of information, and some of it was conflicting. So it was kind of taking a while to really try and piece it together on Sunday. And so I think that I was probably second after her to put it out, what I put out, and I couldn't.
And then a half hour later, Dave Isaac.
Yeah. So just what I said,
go ahead.
Just before we get to Dave, what I had said in that moment was that I'm hearing that Hakstol will be fired. The announcement for Hakstol's firing will come in the next 24 hours. And that the Flyers they'll have an interim coach. Don't know how long. Could be just a game or two. But that Joel Quenneville is a target for them. And that's what I put in my tweet. And then I said, oh, and by the way, here's the story that I wrote about this after talking to everybody all day. And so that was kind of what I put out there, because I could not get any kind of confirmation that anything had specifically happened as far as a new coach was concerned. And again, when I tell you I had to speak to close to maybe, I don't think if it was exactly 12. I was going to say a dozen, but 10, 11, maybe 12 different people yesterday. Not all affiliated with the Flyers, some from outside the organization as well. But at the same time, that's what I was going through yesterday, and it consumed my day. And then you go ahead.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Then go ahead. After that, then
so about a half hour after
Dave's
that,
report, right?
Dave Isaac came out with what felt like an even more definitive report that Hakstol had been fired and Quenneville had been hired. Was, I believe, how the initial article was framed. And that one was kind of that was one that kind of sent shockwaves, because I think yours, I think it's pretty fair to say that a lot of people who would follow Steph Driver and people who would follow you are different circles. I think there is some overlap, but we had a Venn diagram. But I think it's pretty safe to say that they are different groups of Flyers fans for the most part. And I think each respective group kind of picked up on it and ran with it within their own circles. Now, Darren Dreger, actually from TSN, had quote tweeted yours, and I should have it in front of me. But Dreger quote tweeted yours and brought up the fact that he hadn't heard about Quenneville yet, that there really hadn't been much there, but there was a potential for it.
Correct.
Which was interesting. Now then Isaac came out, and I think Dave does a really nice job.
Dave does a great job.
He sits down 2 seats for me in press row. We've had a couple nice exchanges. I think Dave does a very good job. But he came out with what seemed like a very definitive article, which obviously got a lot of traction because it had in its headline what pretty much everybody has been waiting for, and what I would say the majority of the Flyers fan base for the better part of 6 months, a year, have expected or wanted, which was Hakstol fired, and then who's the hottest free agent coach name on the market, and of course that's Joel Quenneville. So a lot of people started running with it, but then that's where we got into the source game, right? That's where we got into, and maybe it's like the thing that people don't totally understand. But if you run with something from one source, there is a potential that it's going to be either incorrect information, or it's going to be you connecting some dots and trying to infer what's being said. And I don't know what happened in the case of Isaac, but the way that came off so definitive, and then it ended up not being correct, at least in that moment it wasn't correct. Quenneville still hasn't been hired, so technically that part of that report or that initial article headline, which I don't know if he wrote himself, a lot of papers, what they have people who do the headlines separately, right? So that part of his reporting was not correct, at least as of this moment.
Yeah. So let me just stop you just for a second. I'll let you
do your thing.
I'll let you continue. I don't begrudge Dave for what he reported, because I'll be honest with you, I had heard the same thing. It just so happened that I was able to corroborate with other people that was not necessarily true. That it had not, that they were interested, but there had not been anything further in that regard. So, I don't know. I'm not going to try and speculate as to what Dave got from who, but at the same time, I think that it's fair to say that what he was told and what he reported was kind of floating through the organization yesterday. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it wasn't. I'm not going to try and debunk his source. I mean, I think that he probably had someone tell him that, because I had someone tell me that as well. So it's his source is a legit, I'm sure, person in the organization. So that's first and foremost. So before anybody jumps all over Dave Isaac, I think that that's kind of really important to understand. And like you were saying, there are sources who are like really reliable. There are sources who when they tell you something, they're so close and so involved with the situation that they are not misleading you. They don't gain anything by misleading you, and you don't gain anything by not trusting them. Okay? So that's kind of the situation there, right? So there are those kinds of sources. Then there are sources who are good sources because they're involved with the organization or involved with the team, but maybe not right, in the thick of who's being fired, who's being hired, who's being traded, whatever. So there's that possibility as well. So that's the second tier of your sources. And then there's a third tier. Actually, there's probably two more tiers at this day. But in my journalistic experiences, there's a third tier of sources, which are people who are kind of, around the team, but not really involved with a lot of the decision-making stuff. So, I mean, everybody hears things because everybody talks to different people. And so a lot of the information you get is second, third, even fourth hand sometimes. That's why you have to flesh it out and talk to multiple people. But now it looks like, and it started, I had a big thing with this on our other podcast, on our Phillies podcast with Bob Wankel, when I criticized the Joe Giglio source on the potential Manny Machado trade to the Phillies in the summer. This fourth level of sourcing has I don't know where it's come from, or whoever said it was actually okay to do, but this fourth level of sourcing that exists out there somewhere is where people use information that's being given to them by other people in the business, of of journalism, I guess, if that's what we want to call what we're doing here, or in the business of reporting at the very least. And that information it really should just be background or shared knowledge. But it's now being turned into sourced information. And personally, I would never, I mean, people want to do that. That's their prerogative. And the reason that's like, if like when Joe Giglio did it, like, man, I would never do that. I would never source another person who does what I do. They may know something. It's very possible that they know everything. And that the fact that they're sharing that with you is very generous of them. But the fact of the matter is, even if it's 100% correct, that person really should never be a source. However, we now live in an age where it's all about getting it out there. So you sometimes trust people like that. I'm not saying that's what happened with Dave. I don't think that's that at all. I think Dave had a legitimate team source who told him what they told him. But at the same time, these kinds of things exist. This is the world we live in now. So it's a lot harder to delineate like what's actually true and what's partially true and what's just something someone's heard. So that's kind of like, it's made it harder to do our jobs. So to me, I was talking to a national reporter the other day, and we were talking about this just in general, not about the Hakstol thing. And we were talking about it, and in the very structure of information and how it's gathered, like determining what to believe and who to trust, it's become so hard anymore because everybody's willing to talk. Everybody's always willing to talk, but it's really trying to determine what you think is right and what you think is not right. And then there's going to be a time, and look, I feel like I've been pretty good lately. But there's going to be a time when I'm going to have to make a call on something and say, yeah, I really believe that, but gee, maybe it's not. And then I might put something out, a speculation, a little bit of, thought, informed opinion. And maybe it's going to be wrong. And then I'm going to have to, backtrack, or I'm going to have to apologize or something, because that's the way it's become anymore. So you have to really, really be careful how it's presented, unless you don't care, in which case, if you don't care, then just throw it out there and hope you're right. I think there's a lot of rumor mongers who do that in all sports, not just hockey. I think there's a lot of people who do that thing. But yeah, so it's the whole thing. I mean, I know a lot of people were killing Dave and killing Steph Driver and killing people in the last 24 hours because of sources. You don't understand. It's really, really difficult because you also have to protect these people because you don't want to get them in trouble for giving you the information. So that's important, but you also have to make sure that they're 100% trustworthy too, and 100% accurate. Even they may be trustworthy and not accurate. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's a possibility. You could trust someone and believe, they might be believing that they're giving you solid information when in fact they're a little bit flawed. And so you have to really discern, hey, this person's come through for me in the past. Are they right? Or are they just off a little bit? It's a tough thing to do. So when you have people, whether it's me or Dave or Steph in this instance, I guess we're the three who were putting it out first ahead of everybody else. You really got to understand that it's a very slippery slope that we walk with sourced information and with our sources. And sometimes it's going to be a lot harder to determine what the information is that you're getting and if it's accurate.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
I think you gave a very nice explainer.
I hope that makes sense for people. I hope it does, because it was I mean, literally, I'm not lying when I said the first message I got Sunday was at like 10:30 in the morning. I put up a story 3.5 hours later, and the tweet that I put out, was it like at 4:30, 4:45? I mean, so you see how long it's not like I got the first text message at 10 o'clock in the morning or 10:30 in the morning and said, okay, let me put that right out there. It took time. So between 10:30 and the time that my story originally posted, we're talking 3.5 hours. There was a lot of conversations, and I wrote the story and put that out there. So that's all from that. And then there was still 3.5 more hours of stuff that was going on, privately in phone calls and text messages before I actually felt comfortable putting a tweet out that said, an announcement's coming in the next 24 hours, and there's probably going to be an interim coach. And Quenneville's a target, but I can't say 100% certainty that he's going to be the guy. And that's 7.5 hours later. So that's the process. I mean, that's what people don't understand, I think, sometimes. And so I think that's part of, what, when you rip us for, you're using sources. Well, you have to, and I get why you question it, but you also have to understand why it happens and how it happens.
There's just it seems like a tightrope walk. This was the thing that you and I and Kevin Kincaid, who covers the Sixers for the site and formerly had been the beat guy for the Philadelphia Union, like that was a thing that I'd said to him is like, he's in his second year on the beat, on the Sixers beat now. Like, at what point does he start, trying to work on getting sources, or has he already started? And he just kind of said, like, he's not really looking to do it now because of the amount of energy it takes to keep those people happy, to protect those people, to sit on a lot of information that you just quite frankly can't report. For him, at least, it doesn't make a ton of sense, or at least, where he's at in his timing on that beat, he just doesn't seem to want to really get into it.
Yeah.
And could he? Sure. Like, Kevin's a very solid reporter. Like, Kevin does a very good job. I'm very confident that if he decided that he wanted to be like the source guy, like
he could be.
He could be.
Yeah, and I think the difference.
There's a lot to that.
Yeah, and
I think that's something I can say this. I think a little bit, more clearly is, when you go from being a fan to then being down around the team or covering the team, like, there is a definite shift in the way that you approach things. And from the fan perspective, I spent most of my time always thinking, like, if these people have sources, why aren't they just telling us as fans everything that they hear? Like, why would you not do that? And the longer I've been down with you, down at Wells Fargo Center, like, the more that I understand why you can't do it. Right. And as a fan, you selfishly would want to get every whisper. But yeah, to your point about misinformation, like, I don't know if this happens, and I don't know if you could speak to this, because I don't know if it's happened with this team before in the 18, 19 years you've covered them, or with anybody else from the national or other market media. But I have to think that at some point, like, new ownership comes in or a new front office comes in, I have to think that it's at some point, like, doesn't a front office or doesn't an ownership group try to burn sources? Don't they feed misinformation and see if anybody picks up on it, and if they do, they can kind of limit the scope of where it could have come from? I don't know. Maybe that's just me being like Bond villain writer here, but like,
I think it's possible.
I think that Dave Scott is super cynical, and like maybe he's gonna try to weed these things out and figure out who's talking to who. Like, maybe. I mean, he's got. I mean, represents Comcast Spectacor. They're a big deal. Yeah. They've got a lot of money. I mean, they're pretty much a perfect Bond villain. Ask customer service. # Comcast cares. Yeah. But I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure people have resorted to that. I mean, when I think back, like, what's the one, like, if I try and go back and say, what's the one report that I put out there that ended up being completely wrong? I go back to, it was an off season. It was a July 1, and Michael Hanzus was looking to sign with a team, and I was talking to the agent at the time, and the agent insisted to me that Hanzus had a deal in place with the Flyers, but he was considering another offer, but he had one in place with the Flyers, and we were going back and forth, and I finally I said, okay, I'm going to put it out, and so I put it out on Twitter. I said, yeah, Michael Hanzus is coming back to the Flyers, because I was convinced, because the agent told me the deal was done, probably going to come to the Flyers. He was considering another offer, whatever, blah blah blah. Well, finally, I got a call from. I put it out on Twitter, and I got a call from somebody in the Flyers. Like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we've not even discussed him. Like, we haven't even we haven't even contacted the agent. And I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, and they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, what the hell? Like this guy's never burned me before. Like this was, like I had never had this problem before. And so then I had to go and, do a little bit of a mea culpa after that. Like, because it was almost like I was making it up. Right. So I think back, I think that's probably the one that was really the one that was the furthest off, completely off, wasn't even true. And I put it out there.
But that wasn't malicious.
No,
for those who have been listening to us the
Yeah.
whole time, like, go back to the media episode that some people loved and some people hated, where
Yeah.
you talked about a certain former beat writer who used to just kind of sit at his keyboard and
make stuff up.
Yeah, legitimately make stuff up.
Yeah, I know. Right. So that was kind of a thing. But going back to what you were saying about Kevin Kincaid, I look at Kevin and I think that we have different audiences. Okay, I think people come to Crossing Broad to read Kevin's analysis because it's a very sharp, smart, informed analysis on basketball and on the Sixers. And he really does a nice job in like breaking that stuff down and everything. And so I think that's what everybody's coming to our site to read Sixers for. When people come to read Flyers and read what I'm writing, I think it's a different audience. I think it's people who know that I've been covering this team for almost 2 decades, that I used to work for the team, so I'm obviously connected to a lot of people down there. And so therefore that what I'm providing, the information I'm providing, is probably going to be a little bit more, I don't want to say informed. That's an unfair word, because I think that a lot of the beat writers are informed, but a little bit more targeted and reliable from a team angle. So I don't know. I don't know if that means that Anthony's going to always offer what the team wants him to say. I don't think that's the case, because I do think I criticize them very much,
A lot.
So I think that there's more to it than that. But I do think that when there are criticisms that are kind of rampant, I'm willing to give them an opportunity to figure it out and say why that is the way it is. And sometimes I will offer a minority opinion on a player or a coach or a performance or whatever the case might be. So I think that that's why people will read me. And I think that that's a little bit different. So when Kevin's like, well, he doesn't feel the need to, be the guy developing sources, it's because he's got an audience that's not looking for that. But I have a feeling that the hockey audience who's reading my stuff is reading my stuff, at least I'd like to think that's the case, is reading my stuff because they
know, respect,
know that it's going to
appreciate.
They know that that's kind of what I'm going to provide. And I mean, I like to think that that's the case. So, for what it's worth.
All right.
Make sense?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay.
Hopefully, I have a feeling that there are going to be some people that are going to feel a little bit better educated on this.
I hope so.
And I don't even think the people who call you condescending are going to think you're condescending in that. So, how about that?
Yeah, right? Go figure.
So we have a lot of questions. I think, man, like, where do we even go from here? So, Dave Hakstol loses his job. It's a shame on a human level, because you don't want to see anybody lose their job, their livelihood. He'll still get paid, so there is a silver lining in that, I suppose. A somewhat tumultuous tenure as the Flyers coach. We've talked a lot this season, especially about just how well respected was he within the locker room, and we've talked about that locker room, and I think that, quite frankly, is the next thing that Chuck Fletcher needs to look at. And if John Bork's report today is to be believed, and we're recording this Monday, Boric came out with essentially saying that the reason that things seemed so helter-skelter with Hakstol's dismissal, why there wasn't a press release provided to the media prior to them being allowed into practice, might have had something to do with the fact that Chuck Fletcher had no intention of firing Dave Hakstol. I don't know if you want to elaborate on it at all from what you know, but what it sounded like, at least in Boric's report, is that Hakstol approached Chuck Fletcher with all of these rumors kind of circulating, with knowing that there had been a feeling within the organization that he might eventually lose his job, or it might have become an inevitability, and he wanted a vote of confidence. Fletcher couldn't give it to him, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah,
accurate, inaccurate, partial truth.
It's not
fake news.
It's not completely inaccurate, and it's also not completely accurate as well. The fact of the matter is that when you have as many people reporting on Sunday, like we were, that this was coming, it's not like that this wasn't coming. Right? I mean, so to sit there and say Chuck Fletcher didn't want to fire him, maybe he didn't want to fire him today, Monday. Maybe he wanted to fire him after Christmas. Maybe he wanted to fire him in January or at the trade deadline.
Maybe he wanted to fire him when he knew that, if the organization, if he wanted, or if Dave Scott wanted Joel Quenneville to be the hire, that they actually had a tentative agreement in place with the guy before they fired their coach. So
I think that's the thing that I took away from watching his presser today, was that if when the questions were asked who was replacing Scott Gordon as the coach of the Phantoms, the look on his face when Fletcher said, "Well, we're still trying to work that out," I think that is indicative of the fact that they probably didn't have a plan in place for today. Because
isn't that crazy?
Because it wasn't something. Again, I think this became a self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. In other words, they were going to do it, and they were going to do it at some point, and it could have been this week, it could have been next week, it could have been whenever, but it was going to happen. But that once it became such a wild story on Sunday that everybody was talking about, and it was international. I mean, it was picked up by every TSN had a story. TSN picked up Dave Isaac's story first, and then they took it down after Draeger reported that Quenneville had not even been contacted yet. But I mean, it was everywhere. And once you have that, I mean, what could they have done? I mean, how does Dave Hakstol come in and work? How's it fair for him to do his job? At that point, even if you weren't planning on firing him today, I mean, how does the guy come in and do a job today with knowing all this information that's out there? It's not like it was some little secret that was kept to a small group of people. This was national news, international news. So what do you do? So I think that at that point, if you're Chuck Fletcher, you have to just expedite it and make the move, and which is what he did today. So it's not that he didn't want to fire him, which is, I think that's where John Bork's story is a little off. Chuck Fletcher was always going to fire Dave Hakstol. He just may not have wanted to do it today. And I think that's where John's story is probably most accurate. And I think it's evident by the fact that they are trying to figure out who the hell is going to be the minor league coach now.
Isn't it like the thing that I think is so surprising about it is I feel like as an organization you should have gone into damage control mode Sunday night, right? Like if you knew that it had gotten picked up not only in the Philly market but nationally, internationally, as you mentioned with TSN, like, isn't it your responsibility as an organization to have a plan in place?
Yeah, but what are you going to do? Like, maybe they don't expect it. So here's the thing. So Chuck Fletcher's brand new here, right? He doesn't know us from Adam. And so all of a sudden, we're putting these stories out, and he's like, whoa, what the hell? Like, he's on a plane flying from Vancouver to Philadelphia. Like, he has
no idea. Flight.
Yeah, and so he really has no idea that this is really, happening. Now, I will say the one thing is that.
What do you mean he doesn't know?
Well,
he has internet on the plane,
right? But do you honestly think that he's sitting there scouring Twitter to see that Dave Isaac and I are tweeting that this is happening? I don't think so.
In fairness, Anthony, it's not like it's just the GM, the coach, and the players on the plane totally disconnected from humanity. Like
yes.
The PR staff knows it's going down.
But listen to me. I've been on that plane. I've been on that plane.
Now you're sounding condescending.
No, but what I mean by that is that you'd be really surprised at how little, stuff is happening with the outside world on that plane. There's a lot. The guys are playing cards, they're playing video games, whatever. The PR people, they're not. I mean, we're all sitting. That you used to, when the media used to travel with them, we sit in the back of the plane. And, you get something to eat, maybe you read a book, maybe you listen to music, you sleep. I mean, you really got to try and catch up on these flights. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that takes place, but maybe not so much. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that of the, 50-some people from the organization who are on the plane that no one is connecting to the internet and seeing what's going on. That's not true. I mean, obviously someone's picking up on it, but do you think if a player is monitoring Twitter and sees that they're going to go say something to the coach or to the general manager? What I can tell you is I know that the two of them were talking on the plane, at least at some point, about making the change to bring Carter Hart up, which we haven't even discussed yet on this show, which we'll get to shortly. I
just kind of wanted to avoid it.
Yeah. But that discussion was taking place between the general manager and the coach on the plane. So if that conversation's happening at the time when we're putting this stuff out there, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then the world is blowing up, what's Chuck Fletcher supposed to do at that point? Like, what's he supposed to do? So I think that's when you say, well, they shouldn't they have a plan in place? If they weren't expecting this story to come out yesterday, then what's your backup plan? Should you always have a plan in place for the firing of a coach?
Yeah,
you're going to say publicly.
You should.
No, come on, Russ, you can't do that.
Why not?
That's too much. I mean, so he should have a plan. He should have a plan in place for whoever he hires as the new coach. He should have a plan in place for.
What's a new coach?
Well, but that's my point.
What I'm saying is, like, when you're going through the interview process, like, isn't one of the first questions, what do you want to do a coach? Like, isn't that a thing? What do you think of this coach? And like, are you going to evaluate and give this guy a fair shake? Which is what Paul Holmgren had said. He had hoped would happen in the aftermath of the Hakstol firing, is that whoever the new GM is, we hope he gives a fair shake, gives an actual opportunity to Dave Hakstol. Like, yeah, I would think that if you're a front office guy and you get hired, that if there's a possibility that at some point you might pursue bringing in a new coach, knowing that there could potentially be some downtime, there might not be a perfect overlap, I would think that the thought had to go through your head of who you might shuffle up or down. Like, I don't think that's totally unreasonable. I mean, at least on an interim basis. Like, you would put out the speculation at the end of November about, if LePerriere were let go, what that shuffling could look like. I mean, you had a contingency plan. You had already kind of worked it out in your post. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's totally unreasonable. Maybe I'm crazy.
But they had something, right? I mean, so they did. I mean, they had
that Gordon was coming up, but they, in the 12 hours it took from the time the flight landed until it actually came out, they didn't actually have Scott Gordon at skate zone to run that practice, which I didn't expect. Like, that's very short notice. But I don't know. Like, why not just send Knobloch down? Wasn't that was a thing in the past, right? That the organization kind of viewed Knobloch as a potential head coach in waiting. Like, why not just send him down?
I still think it might eventually be that. But if you're going to go with Scott Gordon as your interim coach, what's the point in blowing up your other coaches? Like, why get rid of Knobloch now?
Because the power play sucks.
Yeah, but who are you bringing in for an interim coach? This is what I'm saying.
Literally anyone else.
But so I think that's why these guys are sticking around, and they're only sticking around until a new coach gets here, when the new coach will be able to bring whatever assistance he wants.
Will he, though?
Yes.
Will he? Because we've
the only one.
The
only one who I think,
like, Dave Hakstol was only allowed to bring in 2.
But that was Hakstol. No, he didn't bring in anybody under Hakstol. The only one he brought in was Rick Wilson.
Yeah.
And that was last week.
After Hakstol was
Was gone. So I mean, I think Rick Wilson is the only assistant coach who will ultimately survive this. I think whoever the next coach is after Scott Gordon will not retain either Ian LePerriere or Chris Knobloch as an assistant coach. But the organization does like Knobloch enough that I would not be surprised if he was given another gig with the Phantoms. So, I mean, I still maintain that just from conversations that I've had.
Do you think there would be a push from the organization to say, look, like, if Gordon does a good job as interim coach and they know that long term there's no real plan to make him the permanent guy, I mean, for the love of God, please, let's not bring an interim guy and promote him to full-time coach, right? Like, I've seen the story enough. I don't need to see it again. I'm also a Philadelphia Union fan. That's what they do. They get rid of a coach. The interim guy comes in. He has no shot to become the full-time guy, the permanent hire, and it happens every time. And then you're just mired in mediocrity. So, like, let's say that Scott Gordon actually does a good job. He has plenty of an understanding of how a lot of this young core, especially some of the underperforming young core, got to where they got going through the minor league system. So if Gordon does a good job and has good relationships with those players, like, is that maybe the one guy? I mean, like, Wilson, I think, has enough respect within the league and within the game and in coaching circles to be worth keeping on. But is Gordon, like, maybe the one guy that the organization says, hey, we really do want you to keep this guy on. That's our contingency to whatever coach comes in. Like, it's not totally out of the realm of possibility, right? And he's also, like, a pretty darn good special teams coach.
I will say this.
At least at the AHL.
It really depends on who the coach is. If you're talking about Q being the next coach here, whether it's next week, next month, next season, and Q says, I only come there if I bring my own assistants. Are you going to sit there and not hire Joel Quenneville because you want to feel loyal to Chris Knobloch or Ian LePerriere? No.
Not to those guys. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, Gordon, I feel like is a little bit different.
Even Scott Gordon, do you feel like you'd say, no, we'll pass on you, Q. We don't want to hurt Scott Gordon's feelings.
I don't know. Can you tell me if we're blowing up this core at all? Because I'm not so sure that bringing Joel Quenneville in with the crew that we've been around all season is going to go well.
No, and I think that this core does absolutely 100% need to change. There's no doubt about it. It's just that it's just that you're not gonna hold back on a coach just for
loyalty to an assistant.
Yeah,
okay.
Loyalty to one of the guys lower down the totem pole. Now, if you bring in a guy who doesn't have the cachet that Joel Quenneville has, then maybe you could sit there and say, hey, we'd really like this guy to stay. Can we keep him on your staff? We'll let you hire the other two guys.
We're talking like a Mike Yeo.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, if that's who it ends up being, or whoever else, right? Because there will be a plethora of names available in the off season if this does stretch that long. And the interesting thing that Fletcher did say today that he expects being the key word that Scott Gordon will be the coach for the remainder of the season. But he also said, I made him no promises. So, he does leave wiggle room there that he could, in fact, bring in a coach before the end of the season. So there is that possibility. But yeah,
it was interesting that Fletcher kept saying, I have not spoken to Joel Quenneville in 2 years. Yeah. Doesn't mean that somebody within the organization hasn't gotten word out to the aforementioned party's agent.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it could. Hockey is too small of a world for people not to talk to one another. So if if you talk to the agent or somebody else makes a quick phone call quietly behind the scenes, there's you don't worry about tampering per se, but it happens. It's all over the place, right? So I don't put a lot of stock in that whole, well, we haven't spoken in 2 years thing. Okay, maybe you haven't, but that doesn't mean that he's not readily aware of the situation here and maybe hasn't communicated with someone who can communicate with someone who can, you know what I'm saying? Like that those things happen. People are in the know. Like Chuck Fletcher would know if Joel Quenneville was interested in coaching the Flyers, and Joel Quenneville would know if the Flyers were interested in potentially hiring him, even if they've never spoken to one another.
Got it.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. So what you're saying is Joel Quenneville is going to be introduced, what, tomorrow? Wednesday? Whenever he gets done skiing?
No, I don't think that this is I think this is they're playing a game of chicken with one another. And you know, Quenneville can wait. I mean, the beauty of it is he's getting paid $6 million this year to not coach.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's funny you say he was skiing. That's where he is. He's skiing in Colorado. And the last time we saw him, he was doing shots in the parking lot of Soldier Field with Bears fans, right?
Yep.
So I mean, there's, you know, the guy's kind of living it up right now. He's having a good time, as it were. So that's just. I think that you're going to see if it takes a while with him because he wants to wait and see if other opportunities arise that maybe he thinks are better. And if so, you know, does he take that instead? I don't know. It's a great question.
I've got to be honest though. Like I worry about what could happen here in the short term, and by short term, I even mean going into next season. Like I look at what happened with the Sixers and with the extended plan of the process, and then trying to move that timetable up, and then realizing that pretty quickly you're left with no depth. Like I look at the team right now. And you have a team that has no depth, but in theory has a lot of great top-end talent. You're also unsure about the coach. And I look at this and I go, man, you know, you've got a treasure trove of assets. You've got a really stocked minor league system. You've got some attractive players for, you know, on the trade market in terms of established veterans that are members of this core, and then younger players as well who maybe some fans overvalue or tend to overvalue. And some guys that I don't think fans really expect to see traded that very likely could, like Shane Gostisbehere. And I just think, like, man, you know, I don't think Quenneville jives well with this locker room, which is something that you and I talked about yesterday.
He won't put up with Nolan Patrick, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I want to get back to that in a second. But, you know, like, let's say that Dave Scott and Comcast Spectacor says, you know what, like, the way that we get people through the turnstiles is by getting a few big names and making a few splashes. My worry, my fear, is that you end up hiring a coach that's really not the right guy. It's somebody who has a great pedigree. And in theory, like, I don't think you can complain if the team ends up getting Joel Quenneville. You should probably be elated if you're a fan. But with this current locker room, I don't see it working. So then does that mean that we're now going to watch guys like Ghost get traded? Guys like Sanheim get thrown into deals for not an aging veteran, but somebody who's probably on the end of their prime years. Do we see them go out and splurge a ton of money in free agency next year? Yeah, I would think they're going to splurge quite a bit of money. But are they going to end up making moves that are, you know, flashy and are going to bring fans in, but might not make them instant cup contenders? That's the thing that I fear. That's the thing that I think as a fan, people should be cognizant of and maybe a little bit worried about. I don't know how fair it is, but I could understand from a business perspective if you're Comcast Spectacor making a few big moves because, quite frankly, you know, looking at prospects and looking at young players and hoping that they develop over the next 3 or 4 years, that does nothing to help the bottom line this year or next year. So I feel like at some point somebody has to make a declarative statement about what the vision of this team going forward is. And quite frankly, I don't think there is one. I don't think there has been one. I feel like it's been, you know, under Hakstol, it was, you know, we're building to something. We don't have an end date of when that is. But at some point, we'll all, almost like the Hinkyism, like, we'll all know. And in this case, like, I still don't think there's a real vision for this team of what the team's identity is, and part of that now is because you don't have a coach, but the team doesn't really have an identity. I would argue that the team really hasn't shown a lot of heart. I know that Chuck Fletcher said in his presser today that, he still sees a heart in this team. I don't see it. I don't see any kind of grit. I'm not seeing a team that looks like they're playing hard for one another. If they were, I think you would see more performances of, better than, we played a good 20-minute period, or we played a good 10-minute stretch in a 20-minute period, and then the wheels came off. I don't know. I don't see a lot of things that fans want to have happen working for this team right now. I think you need to have a total reconstruction of the roster, and quite frankly, can you do it on the fly? Can you rebuild and gut a core and trade off some of these younger guys and hire a multiple Stanley Cup winning coach and make the playoffs this year? Like that seems like a real tall task.
Well, it is.
Am I crazy?
No, it is a real tall. But see, that's what you're saying. Like, I think that you're a little off in the sense that you're saying, well, they need to do it this year. And I don't think you need to make a complete overhaul of this roster. I think that there are a handful of moves that need to be made. But I think that's the key thing is, and this is a great item that I saw in a story written by Craig Custance, who I first met back in, I want to say 2005. I think he was covering the Atlanta Thrashers for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And he's bounced all over the place and became a national NHL writer, worked at ESPN for a while. Now he's at The Athletic in Detroit and covers the Red Wings, does a really good job there. But he did a story, I think it was today, as a matter of fact. Maybe it was Sunday, but it might have been today, where he broke down every NHL general manager and how often they trade, and when they trade, and the types of trades that they make, and using his Chuck Fletcher's era in Minnesota. Fletcher makes 80% of his trades between January 1st and the trade deadline. 80%. The next closest GM to that total was, I believe, 64%. I'm going to look it up real quick to see what it was. Let's see. So Fletcher was 80, and most active during trade deadline window. Lou Lamoriello, 65, was second. So, and then Jarmo Kekalainen from Columbus was third at 63. So, but Fletcher, 80% of his trades occur between January 1st and the trade deadline. So I think we're going to see a lot of moves coming up here for the Flyers. I think that Chuck Fletcher's hitting his window when he likes to make these things happen.
Get your popcorn ready.
Yeah, man, it's going to happen. There's going to be some stuff going down. This isn't it. This is not the last shoe to drop in Flyerland for this year. I promise you that.
One of the things that was in your piece over the weekend that I thought was interesting, and we've talked a lot about which guy could be the first to go. We've speculated that, maybe it ends up being Wayne Simmons, maybe it ends up being Jake Voracek. You'd posited an interesting deal involving Simmons going to Toronto. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all.
Well, what I can tell you is that there have been conversations with the Maple Leafs. The Leafs really feel like, and they're a really good offensive team, right? But I think that they feel like that they're missing a real power forward ever since they got rid of Van Riemsdyk. Well, they didn't
Can
get rid
I
of him,
interest you in James Van Riemsdyk?
they didn't get rid of him, but he signed as a free agent with the Flyers. So I think that's something that they're looking for, and so I think Wayne Simmons going. The Maple Leafs are also in a tight spot for their salary cap beyond this year. Really tight spot. So they're really going to look for a power forward who does not have term and money beyond this season. So they would like to find like a rental. But they want somebody who they can bring in sooner rather than later. They don't want it to just be end of February and then they play a month and a half and then the playoffs. They're really trying to hope to get somebody that can really, make a push because they want to catch Tampa. They want to win the Atlantic Division. They want to be the number one seed in the Eastern Conference and have everything go through Toronto, which is a crazy place to be come playoff time. And, so that's kind of what they're pushing for. And so Wayne Simmons certainly interests them. And I kind of heard that there's been some conversation there, been a little back and forth, and that the Flyers' interest is in a former Flyer son, and that's Kasperi Kapanen. And Kapanen's in his, I don't want to call it his first full season because he hasn't played a full season yet, but only played 38 games last year, really didn't provide much offense, but he's actually scored 12 goals in 31 games so far this year. They have 22 points in 31 games or 32 games, whatever they've played so far. So he's starting to come around as a guy that they really feel like could be something that would be a nice young piece of a future core. He's only 22 years old. So I think that there's something there. I think that there's some legs to that. There might be more involved. Now, the thing that I haven't quite gleaned quite yet from the people that I've talked to is, was this a deal that was this the deal that Hakstol was working on when he was fired? Or is this something that has come up since Chuck Fletcher has been there? So that I've not been able to discern. So that's why I've speculated about it in my post and now here on the podcast, but I have not kind of reported it because I've not been able to glean where that delineation occurred.
Got it. Let's get to some questions. You
Yeah,
ready?
I'm ready.
I love questions. We love questions. It's the Snow the Goalie podcast, of course, the people's podcast. So let's get to there's so much. There are so many. All right. I did like, by the way, there was some really good imagery that was going on Twitter earlier today between you and superfan BJ Beretta. He said expecting Quenneville but getting Gordon today is like asking for a Red Ryder BB gun for Christmas but getting cozy socks. The warm cozy socks are more practical but not as exciting. And you said it's the pink bunny suit. And
that's right.
That is definitely it.
Wow, I mean, what else could it be, right?
Yep. So let's get into some more questions. So Todd Shannon at TShannonNJ on Twitter says, what style system will Scott Gordon run?
I don't think it'll be much different offensively. I think it's going to be a very similar system to what they've already had in place. But I think that you're looking at a difference. I think there's going to be a change in the PK, and that's weird to say because the PK's actually been somewhat better of late. But Gordon really was known both as when he was an assistant coach in the NHL and a head coach in the NHL, and now since he's been a head coach in the AHL, as a guy who really does well with the penalty kill. So I think you might see a change to the way the PK plays. But the one thing that I like about the Phantoms and the way that they play is they're an aggressive skating team. They do focus on team defense. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think he's going to try and close the Flyers' biggest issue is their outside of goaltending is their breakout and how the puck turns into a hand grenade when they start passing it to one another. It just kind of blows up on the end of their stick. I think he's going to try and make simpler plays for them to get out of the zone, be a little bit closer together. Don't keep trying for stretch plays. I mean, one of the things, we sit there up in the press box and we say, how the hell does Dale Weiss keep getting out on these breakaways? And I think, you see TK doing it a lot too. I think that they're coached to, as soon as they see a potential possession change, to just take off. It's like a fast break in basketball, right? Get down the court. I think it's the same concept here with the Flyers, and the Flyers would try and make that happen. They would try and make that home run play. And in reality, they really shouldn't because they don't have the players to keep doing that with success on the regular basis, right? So I think then what you'll see is a lot more conservative, a lot more dink and dunk, a lot more, check downs, if we were going to make other sport references here. I think that's what you're going to see more of with this group. And I think that's what Scott Gordon brings as the head coach for however long he's here.
Jerry Temple asked if there are any guesses on new lines or deep pairings under Gordon, and then asks about Carter Hart, which we didn't even get to. I don't really think there's a whole lot to say about Carter Hart getting the call up. I know a lot of people are going to, be excited. The fans are getting what they had clamored for in the preseason, but ultimately, like, you're going to get a 20-year-old kid who probably isn't ready to come up, and quite frankly, is being set up in a sense is being set up to fail with a poor playing defensive core in front of him and a group of forwards who often cheat for a breakaway more so than get back and check within their own defensive zone. So I don't know. I guess we'll find out if Carter Hart at 20 years old with minimal AHL experience can come in and steal games for you.
Yeah, I think he's going to get a game here. I think he's going to play Tuesday. Beyond that, I don't know. I think that trading for a goalie is a really high priority on Chuck Fletcher's list right now, and I think that's something he's going to try and do. So I think Carter Hart is here short term. I mean, Fletcher even said it today. This is not the most ideal time for Carter. He said it in his
we tried we tried everything else.
We've tried every other goalie in the organization. Is what he said. So I mean,
poor Felix Sandstrom is sitting somewhere saying, come on, man.
But I think it's, hey, if Carter comes in and steals the show and plays his ass off, that's great. That's gravy. But you can't expect that. And even if he has a bad game, you can't criticize. If he even has a good game, you can't praise him and say, see, we should have been up all along. I think that there's a lot more to this, and I don't think that they're looking to to make him the guy from this point forward. I don't see that happening. The other question was, do I expect new lines? One I think that you're going to see is I think they're going to try and play Nolan Patrick with Claude Giroux.
And what did I say on the last show?
Yeah, I think that they're going to try that. I don't know. So if you go Patrick, Giroux, Konechny as your top line, there's a lot of skill there. But boy, oh boy, there's no defensive presence whatsoever. I mean, none.
That's okay. Go put him out there with defensive stalwart Andrew McDonald and maybe Shane Gostisbehere.
Maybe you can get away with that as a line in a home game because you get the last change, right? And so you can match them up against who you want to play them against. But you can't trot that line out on the road. You'll get slaughtered. I'll get
well,
destroyed.
In fairness, they get slaughtered on the road quite frequently, so I don't think it can be all that much worse.
Yeah, so it'll
Can I just say, go
ahead.
I think there's a lot of logic to this. And I think from Chuck Fletcher's perspective, I don't know if he's the one who influenced this move or not, but I think there's a lot of sound rationale behind it because like we talked about on the last show, Nolan Patrick's points production at least, has been so abysmal this season. And he's on track to, I think, have about the same amount of points as he did last year. If I'm the Flyers, I want to know what I have in Nolan Patrick right now. We talked about on the last show that he probably should have gotten a year in the AHL. Maybe it was a little bit more of a pressure on Hakstol's part to, get him up and have fans, feel like they could see the next generation or whatever the thought process was of having him, be essentially guaranteed a spot at a camp last year. If playing with Claude Giroux doesn't get you on the stat sheet in terms of points, in terms of assists, or getting yourself some open looks at the net and getting a couple goals here, then, I mean, at some point you have to see Patrick get probably demoted to 3C, maybe get sent down. I don't know what they're going to do, but I would assume that at some point, if he's not going to be the 3C, then at least if you're Chuck Fletcher that you need to go out and acquire another center because, as always, it feels like the organization has a ton of centers, but none of them are particularly good in terms of being able to come up from the AHL and be a long-term contributor to this team in any kind of meaningful top 9 role, right? So,
right.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know how well that lasts or how well that works.
Just wait. Nolan Patrick in the next 5 games is going to have 13 points.
Yeah. So the second line will be Couturier between JVR and Simmons. I'm sorry, Simmons and Simmons and Voracek. Van Riemsdyk will be on the third line with
$35 million.
Yeah, Lawton and Raffle. And then your fourth line is going to be Weiss, Veroni, and Lindblom. And Laterra and Wheel, I think, are going to be your extra guys.
Veroni.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chuck Fletcher likes him for some reason. I mean, he's it's not like he's a prospect. I mean, he's 28 years old. He's a career AHLer. But you know what? Sometimes you get guys like that who, who've been paying their dues for a long time, who are just waiting for an opportunity, and a fourth line role is kind of what they fit, and they do a nice job in limited minutes. And I have
I'm
no
not
problem.
here for Rudy. I'm here to win hockey games.
I have no problem trying. He has not looked bad in the games he's played. I think Phil Varoni's played well. Now it's 3 games he's played, but let's wait and see. But in that role, I don't think it's a bad role for him.
Mike Seto on Twitter at @mdeathandtaxes. Do you think Fletcher will give Gordon a month or two to see if his coaching changes things before moving any core pieces, or is his mind made up given the repeated problems with this group of players? I think you already kind of talked about.
Well, I think that they're going to try and get a goalie right away. I think that's
Corey Crawford concussed. That causes a few problems.
Yeah, that's not good. But I think we got to remember, there's Jonathan Quick too. He's available, and Craig Anderson in Ottawa is available. So there's some players that are out there. I think that's going to be first, but I do think you're going to see at least another week or so before you will really start talking about breaking up the core, just to kind of see how the player. I think Fletcher wants to see how these players react to the coach's firing. The one thing he said also today. He's like, "This is Dave Hakstol's a good coach. He's a good hockey guy." This is all on the players. I mean, that was something he said, which I'm glad he said, because this is all on the players. So it's going to be interesting to see how they react. And another thing that he said that was really refreshing is he says, look, it's a clean slate with a new coach. And he says a lot of guys are going to come in and, they're going to get an opportunity to play more minutes than they've had before. And other guys are going to get, probably play less than they have before. And so it's going to be good for some and not good for others. I mean, this is the stuff that the general manager was saying. So there's going to be some real interesting dynamics, I think, around this locker room moving forward with Scott Gordon as the coach, and really kind of give you an idea, I think, of what Chuck Fletcher's thinking as far as the roster is concerned moving forward.
Luke Rocchetto, or Crossetto, depends on, I guess, how he pronounces it, asking about Gordon's coaching style, which we already kind of touched on. And just kind of brought up the fact that the Flyers have been so heavily rumored in chasing Quenneville, but Fletcher said he hasn't spoken to him in 2 years, which I think we also got to. Mike Aceto had a theoretical trade that he wanted to get our opinion on.
Okay.
St. Louis Blues get Jake Voracek, Shane Gostisbehere, a protected first-rounder, Sam Morin, and a B-level prospect. The Flyers get Tarasenko and Pareko. Your thoughts?
I don't think you have to give up that much. Voracek, Gostisbehere, and a first-round pick,
and Morin and a B-level prospect.
And Morin, yeah, I don't think you need to give up that much for those two.
No,
I don't. I think. So let's put it this way. I think Voracek for Tarasenko straight up would work. Just for kicks. That's not anything that's real. I'm just saying it. I think if St. Louis was given an option, I think they would make that trade, and I think the Flyers, if given the option, would make that trade. So then you're basically saying you got to trade Gostisbehere, a first-round pick, and Morin for Pareko? No, it's too much. I don't think you need to give up that much. It's an interesting concept. It's an interesting thought. The Blues are willing trading partners. They said that they're looking to, kind of rebuild a little bit. I don't know. I think it's an interesting offer. I don't think it happens, but I think it's an interesting discussion.
What do you think the likelihood is that Ghost ends up getting dealt?
I think it's better than 50% at this point. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because I wouldn't have said it at the beginning of the season. But he's just been so bad this year, and I have a feeling that there's a little disconnect in that locker room with him. He's not done well with any coach that he's had at this level. And I mean head and assistant.
Ooh.
So, yeah, I think that he's going to go. If I don't think it's a guarantee, but I think that it's more. Let's put it in the more likely than not likely category.
Okay. Steve Appleman says, where do the Flyers go from here in terms of playing for the future? Do they need to salvage the season in an attempt to make the playoffs, or do they lose for Hughes and use their goalie situation as an excuse to get a top draft pick?
I would try and lose for Hughes at this point. And it's only because making up the difference that they have to make up. I mean, 8 points doesn't sound like all that much in the division, but there's those 3 teams at the top of the division are significantly better than the Flyers, and it's really going to be hard to catch them. So then you say, all right, well, what about a wild card? Well, they're actually further out of the wild card. They're 10 points out of a wild card race. And while I'm not buying Montreal completely right now, I think that they're going to fall back to the pack a little bit. I also think that there's a lot of teams in front of the Flyers who are better than the Flyers at this juncture. So I don't see the real benefit at this point. I just don't see it in trying to get back into the playoff. They're going to say they are because it's too early in the season to not say you are. But I think ultimately Fletcher realizes that this is something that has to be broken up, and you got to be looking at 2019-20 season and not 2018-19.
Nick Papillo and Creven Duff both asked about the timing of calling up Carter Hart. Is it too soon? Did he need more time to develop?
We
touch on this. It's too soon, but they didn't really have much of a choice.
Right, and I don't think that. I don't think that this is a long-term call-up. I think this is a short-term call-up, unless he comes in and just blows out the competition and just, shuts them down and putting up tremendous numbers and worth, like Jim Carrey was in his rookie year with the Washington Capitals way back when. Then yeah, okay, fine. Then you keep him. But so it's a no lose situation, unless the only way it's a lose situation is if he's getting pummeled and you keep throwing him out there just because you don't have anybody else to put out there. I mean, that's negligence at that point. But as long as it's either a short term, either he does great and it's good for the Flyers, or he struggles and he gets sent back down again after a couple games. Either case,
or he's really good and they put Michael Neuvirth back in because that's the cute thing to do.
What does it say about Michael Neuvirth that he's healthy and he can't even be the starting goalie anymore? Like,
define healthy for Michael Neuvirth.
He's healthy enough to get dressed.
Well, did he get dressed with a button down? Did he try to pull a shirt over his head? I'm guessing right? He would have probably torn a tendon at that point, right? We don't have there isn't an official word on Brian Elliott yet, right?
What I can say is this: so there was thought that he might need another surgery, but he went and got tests done, and his tests show that maybe not. That there's a path maybe to recovering without the surgery. It's going to require a longer recovery period. So originally he was only going to be out for a couple of weeks. We're now at probably 5 weeks now that he's been out of the lineup. And it's going to be at least another 2, probably 3 or 4. I think that you're probably looking sometime in January where he'll come back, and that this will end up being an 8 to 9 week recovery. And I think if it works out that point, then you have Elliott plus whoever Fletcher trades for as your 2 goalies.
Okay. Roar68 says, question, do you feel with Hakstol being fired, it will have a negative effect on Dutch Gretzky's ice time? Better yet, do you feel that Gordon brings up Lehigh Valley Phantoms players in place of Weiss, Laterra, Manning? Well, I don't know why it says Manning. Manning's gone, but...
It just feels like he's still here. That's how bad the defense is.
The Mad Dog. Ruff, ruff, ruff.
No, I look, this is not Scott Gordon's call. This is Chuck Fletcher's call. Scott Gordon is just like, yes, sir, I'm glad I still have a job.
Please, sir, I want some more. What?
Yeah. No, I don't think you're going to see a lot of Phantoms get called up because who are you calling up? Like, who that's down there right now?
Phil Myers.
That you say, oh, God, yeah, he should be playing. But he's not playing great. But I think Mark Friedman is playing better defensive hockey for the Phantoms than Philip Myers is. So, I mean, if you're going to go to a prospect defenseman, he might not be a top prospect, but, he was a third-round pick. I think Friedman's a guy that, you can maybe lean on a little bit more to fill in a role at this point than you would Myers. So, there you go.
JB in Space says, what percentage, if any, of Hart call-up was trying to distract the narrative around botching the coaching change with the news leak?
None. They really don't have a choice. I mean, Alex Lyon is not an NHL goalie. He's just not.
He's a friend of the show.
Yeah, great guy. Hell of an interview.
Fantastic, great guy. We love him. Fantastic.
But he's not. He's not ready for this. This is not his thing. So if you're gonna, do you want to have Alex Lyon get pummeled game after game after game? I don't want to see that. So just at this point, it's like, well, we've tried everyone else. Let's go to Carter. So no, I don't think it was to cover the botching of the coach.
Cliff Watling, and I think this is directed at you. What on the hell happened with the false reports of Quenneville coming aboard? So-called sources got it half right, but that's not good enough. Do you trust that source going forward? What happened there? There was 3 or 4 of you. Oh, that's all the toys in the basement that just fell over. Wow. Yo, somebody in this basement is upset. Do you trust that source going forward? What happened there? There was 3 or 4 of you that made the report. All the same wrong source? ?
I don't. Like I said to somebody else on Twitter earlier, I stand by everything that I've written. I don't think that there's anything that I've written that was wrong, and how it was worded. I do. If you listened earlier in the show, if you haven't, go back and rewind. But maybe it was answered then. There are nuances to sources, but I still stand by everything that I've written as 100% accurate at this point.
Oh, look at this. Bill Meltzer jumping into my mentions. All right. So Flyers Eric says, do you think Hart gets a start tomorrow, even though Neuver was the first off the ice today? To which Bill Meltzer, who was not tagged in this, jumps into my mentions, says that Hart definitely almost definitely starts tomorrow. Today was his first practice. It wasn't a typical practice day. For what it's worth, he practiced in what is more commonly the starter net. So that's interesting. Scott Hartnell's lost glove on Twitter. Oh, hey, friend. 5-star review.
5-star reviewer.
Do you think that Gordon will get a fair shot at being the next head coach, or is it almost a foregone conclusion that it'll be an outside hire? Gotta think it's the latter.
Well, it's more likely going to be the latter. Yeah, who knows? I mean, if the guy comes in and all of a sudden the team rolls off, 10 out of 12 and gets themselves back in the playoff race and is really wildly successful, then sure, yeah. I mean, he said today. He said that everybody's a candidate, and that includes Scott Gordon. I've told him he's a candidate, but I've made no promises. So, could he be the coach? Sure, but he would have to wow you. I mean, they can't continue to be a average to below average team with Scott Gordon and think that he might be the guy long term.
Michael MPH brings up the fact that the Phantoms are making Kerry Huffman the interim coach. Samuelson is going to be his interim assistant coach. Mm-hmm. He says that he doesn't like the look of the way that the farm system is just grooming more ex-Flyers to be coaches yet again. Haven't we learned to be done with this former player pipeline? No.
Well, so just so you know, Shel Samuelson was a longtime minor league assistant coach, never to be an NHL assistant coach, and then stopped doing it because he didn't want to really do it anymore. I think this is just hey, I'll help out because you guys need somebody at this point. But he's not looking for aspirations to be a coach at the NHL level. Kerry Huffman might eventually be looking to do that, but this is his first real chance to be an assistant coach in the AHL, and he's going to be a head coach. But I think again, interim. He might be more interim than Scott Gordon is. Let's put it that way.
CBS Gone Fishing says the parts don't fit, but they can't make a panic move when everyone knows you need to. So what should they do regarding trades? I think we touched on that. Dr. Janitor also brought up the Doug Armstrong calling about Tarasenko and Pregos. So we also hit on that. Andrew Wells, with recent D struggles, do you expect to see Myers or Friedman at some point in the near future? You said it's more likely we would see Friedman than Myers.
Yeah, I
say heck with it. Gordon's here. Call up Phil Myers. Let's get wild. Let's get crazy.
I don't think he's ready. I think Friedman's
together we build.
I think Friedman's closer to being ready. I really do, and I think that he would be the guy first.
Bold prediction time. from Chris Malaga, who says the Flyers make a deep run into the playoffs with with Giroux, Hughes, and Tarasenko on the first line, with Quenneville behind the bench. Possible? Likely?
Next year, you're talking about?
I guess so. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, with Hughes, Tarasenko, and Giroux. With Quenneville behind the bench. Possible?
You're asking for a lot to happen there.
Sure are.
Trading for Tarasenko, losing enough, and winning the lottery to get the number 1 overall pick, and then convincing a 3-time Stanley Cup winning coach to come in and coach a team that was the worst team in hockey the year before. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think that's asking for too much. Now, is it possible that 1 or 2 of those things could happen? Maybe, but I don't think all 3 do. No.
Okay. Anthony, I think it's time. We've got some 5-star reviews, and of course, it's
my favorite part of the show.
We skipped, I think, at least 1 episode, maybe 2 episodes of Who's That Flyer? So I think it's time.
Okay.
This Philadelphia Flyer, who I just looked up, in his first season with the Orange and Black, played 28 games. It looks like, yeah, he played 28 games. He scored 4 goals and had 9 assists. His plus-minus for the Flyers in that season was a minus 1. Name that Flyer.
That's all I get? He played 28 games in his first season? That's all I really get?
I will tell you that he played for another team in that same year, and his total for that season was a minus 18.
So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Did he start as a Flyer, or he came from another team?
He came from another team.
So the first season he played as a Flyer was 28 games. So he was traded to the Flyers.
Yes.
And he had 4 goals?
He had 4 goals for the Flyers. That season he had 10 goals, 21 assists. He was a minus 18. Who's that Flyer?
Man, that's a tough call. I have no idea. Tony Amonte.
No. I'm going to give you another shot.
I don't think there's enough information. It's too...
What else would you like? What can I do to help you? Do you want to know where he came from? Did I give you the year?
There you go. Now, tell me where he came from. That might help.
He came from Carolina.
Sammy Kapanen.
There it is. The father of future Flyer.
Yeah.
Wink, wink. Kasperi Kapanen. Yeah. Sammy Kapanen. Figured that was that tied the whole thing together.
That's good. That was good. That's good. I'll give you that one.
Now it's time for iTunes reviews.
This is my favorite. My favorite part of the show.
By the way, BJ Beretta, who left the iTunes review under the name Things Are Looking Up, who mentioned he wanted to play catch with you. He has inquired via DM on Twitter to see if this is legit. And I'm going to figure it out, darn it. I'm going to figure out a time for you guys to play catch. I want video. I'm going to put it up on Crossing Broad. I'm very excited. All right, Roar68. We love Roar. Roar68 is fantastic. A follower on the Press Row Show. And, of course, a listener to Snow The Goalie. The People's Podcast, the Players Podcast. Okay. Out with the old, in with the new. 5 stars. Roar68 used our last episode's title. That's fine. Tickets are down because the attention is off ice stuff and not on the ice. Gritty is okay. 1, don't need the glass lighting up. 2, video show in between periods on the ice every game. Is all this to draw attention away from the product, the Flyers? Hey, look over here and don't look at this stuff. When your 4th line has Laterra and Weiss. Flyers fans can't connect with these guys. Give me Hound, Hammer, Brownie, Loppy, Cochran, Talbot. Someone that's showing... Wait, gosh, this is so strangely worded. Someone that's showing me that even though Flyers may lose, they're working hard for your money for the ticket you paid for. Love the show. Love the show in between periods. Long live Dutch Gretzky.
I love that he used the 5-star review as a way to get his philosophy on hockey out, as opposed to talking about the show.
I wanted longtime listener, first time caller in there.
Thanks, Roar. Appreciate it, bud.
Dog Pound 9219 says, hands down the best Flyers podcast. 5 stars. Out of all the Flyers podcasts out there, I look forward to Snow the Goalie the most. Easily the most informative Flyers related news. Cannot beat Anthony's inside scoops and looks on the team. I find the best part of Snow the Goalie is being able to take a step back and try not to make decisions based on being a fan. Keep up the amazing work, guys. There you go, Anthony. We have
Thanks,
one more.
dog.
We have one more. Wow. That should just be a sound
Thanks,
drop
dog.
from now on. Thanks, dog.
Well, that's his name, right?
Come on, Bo. Primo hoagies, sesame seed buns. Okay. Must listen podcast. 5 stars. Philly person. The best thing the Flyers have done besides gritty has been giving these 2 press credentials. I have been a fan from the beginning, and the podcasts have always been a great listen. Lately, they have gone from great to immediately stop whatever it is you're doing and listen. I eagerly look for the podcasts to hit because, honestly, they are more entertaining than the product on the ice. This is far and away the best coverage of the team. Anthony's access and writing sets the bar for what good hockey coverage can be, but so often is not this day and age. I think he balances well with Russ. As a new dad, I love your dad jokes. Great balance, great insights, and Flyers content you can't get anywhere else. Thank you, Philly person.
You know, person, that was a great review until you got to the part about Russ and his dad jokes.
Wow, that's... Look. Cut me a little bit of slack. All right? Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. All right.
But anyway, so that's good. 3 more good 5-star reviews. Keep them coming, guys.
We are quickly approaching 100 in a, 6-ish? Is it a 6-month span? We're doing the podcast is a little bit longer? No. 9 months?
8.
We're getting there.
Yeah, 8 months.
So, if you're listening to the show, of course, welcome back. Don't forget to go, tell everybody you know, any Flyers fan, about Snow the Goalie. And make sure they subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever else they get their podcasts. If you can, get to somebody who has an iPhone or an Apple device or some kind of device that can get iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Leave a 5-star rating. That's great. That helps us climb the charts. We love the 5-star reviews because we'll read them on air, and that's what we're here for. Of course, also check out the Press Row Show. Anthony, you're not going to be down there Tuesday,
well,
are you? Are you?
To be determined now.
Ooh.
Yeah, we'll see.
Is that good? I don't know if that's good. It's good for me. I don't know if that's good for you.
I'm gonna try and make it work. We'll see.
Yes.
I have a conflict Tuesday night, but maybe can make it work so that I can get down there because I think it's kind of important for Carter Hart's first game, Scott Gordon's first game, that I should probably be there.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, the Press Row Show will be going off regardless because I will have, if I must, I don't want to fill your seat. It would be very sad to have to do it, but I already have somebody lined up.
Who?
I'm not going to tell you.
You can't tell me? You already have somebody. You have somebody lined up?
Not yet. In theory, I do. Look, Anthony, let's be honest. Everybody looks longingly at the Press Row Show as it's going on. Live from Press Row at Wells Fargo Center. And they say, man, the pinnacle of my career would be getting on the Press Row Show, which is live streamed on Anthony SanFilippo's Twitter account. Although in that case, it would probably be from my fantastic Twitter account, @JoyOnBroad, where I have 1/15 or 1/18 of the followers Anthony does. But, of course, the Crossing Broad Facebook page, which has like 28,000 people or something that like it. So, of course, check out the Press Row Show. We have games coming up Tuesday and Thursday that we'll both be at. Saturday, I probably won't be at, so Anthony will likely run that with somebody else. But go check us out there. Don't forget, we do pregame, so 7 o'clock games, we're usually going live at about 6:30. 6:35 at the latest. Really depends on if the popcorn's ready, because that is a necessity. We have to prioritize things.
And your coffee. Your coffee and popcorn.
My coffee and popcorn, or I've been going for the iced tea lately. I don't know.
Because it's good.
Ooh, here's the thing, though. This is the life hack that I found. There was an out-of-town guy who grabbed a coffee cup, and he filled it to the brim with M&Ms. And from that point on, I realized I was an idiot for filling up those cute little mustard
ramekins,
cups or whatever there.
Those little ramekins, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I've been doing that when I could have just filled up a regular cup, but whatever. This is it's 2018. I'm learning on the job.
There you go.
So go check out the Press Row Show. Again, it's on Anthony's Twitter account via Periscope and on the Crossing Broad Facebook page. We're there. You can send us questions, and unlike pretty much any other pregame or intermission show, we immediately interact with you as the viewers, the listeners, whomever, and you throw some questions out, and we will be sure to answer them, to react as we see what will likely be Carter Hart's first NHL start. So that's very exciting. That's well worth the price of admission. I expect there's going to be a pretty large crowd for this game, would be my guess.
It could be. Yeah,
I think so. People are going to be excited. Like there has to be excitement about Carter Hart, and I think you kind of wash away the film of what the Hakstol era was to some of the fans in the city, like, yeah, I have to assume that there is going to be a pretty decent sized crowd. It is a Tuesday night, which, is what it is, but I'm expecting a big crowd. So anyway, go check out the Press Row Show. Thanks as always for listening to Snow the Goalie. Go check out the other shows on Crossing Broad Podcast Network. Those links can be found in the bottom of the description of this episode. And of course, Anthony and my Twitter accounts are also linked in the description. So just click on those and you can hit follow, and life is good, and keep the conversation going on Twitter. So for Anthony at SanFilippo, I'm Russ at Joy on Broad. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you soon.